Good evening, students.
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay. So the last session, we started talking about race and race concept, correct? We briefly discussed about the concept of race and racism, correct? And then we went on discussing about the criteria for classifying humans. So traditionally that we have learned that humans started recognizing that we have differences, phenotypic differences or morphological differences among us. So they used those differences to classify humans into different races. Okay, so we discussed briefly about those factors. We talked about the factors there, the specific factors like skin color. We talked about cranial index. We talked about morphological features such as facial index, nasal index, dermatoglyphics, etc. We discussed. Okay, in the syllabus, they ask us to briefly know non-metric and metric characteristics. Non-metric and metric characteristics. Okay, what are the non-metric and metric characteristics in them? So I was telling you non-metric or metric referring to quantitative and non-quantitative characteristics of what we discussed yesterday. Okay, which of them are non-metric and metric characteristics? Sharing the screen with you. So which of those characteristics we discussed in the class yesterday are measurable? Can you pick up some of these examples that we discussed yesterday and categorize them into metric and non-metric characteristics?
So under metric, we can do nasal index, cranial index.
So everything that we could measure, like metric characteristics include cranial index, okay, facial index, nasal index, etc. That are measurable. Basically, we are talking about measurable characteristics or metric characteristics. So there were several metric characteristics that we learned about. So just know that. So those quantifiable characteristics. Quantifiable characteristics. Okay, such as these ones. Cranial, facial index, nasal index, those that we could measure. Okay, nowadays, because of some advancement in technology, you may be able to measure even the pigmentation, but in historically, we could not. We know how dark, lighter or darker. We can only tell the pattern approximately, but otherwise it is difficult to measure the darkness or lightness. But nowadays some new technologies have come which may probably do this. Okay, So which of those things that we discussed yesterday, which are non-metric characteristics?
Skin color, hair texture,
Color, right.
mongoloid eye.
Mongoloid eye, right? Epicanthic fold. Clearly, either someone have it or don't have it. Correct. So things like epicanthic fold, although technologically it made possible today, but in general, skin color, lighter, darker, hair texture. Okay. Dermatoglyphics or fingerprints. So those characteristics that we learned as part of the patterns. So various patterns that we discussed towards the end of the class. So in the fingerprints, for example, okay, those either they are there or not there. Correct. So these are the epicanthic fold, especially, and this fingerprints. We cannot measure them. So these are examples of non-metric characteristics. Although skin color, hair texture, we may have a bit of technology to help us and identify the intensity of it, but otherwise they can also be considered as non-metric characteristics. Like that, there are some non-metric, some metric characteristics that are used for classifying humans. So I sent you a video. I'm not sure if you got a chance to look at the video. Did you get a chance to see the video? I posted this afternoon. Okay, that video briefly talks about, touches upon the how races are made, okay, or how races have been recognized. So morphological features and biological features. They are different anthropologists and people with different backgrounds, mostly sociologists. They talk about what is their view of concept of race. A simple video, about 10-minute video. They talk about in the social context whether race is a valid term or not. Right? Biologically, we can see differences, but can biological features define who we are? Can we say this is an inferior race and a superior race based on their characteristics? Because biological characteristics can differentiate us. We can see Africans being different from Caucasians, being different from maybe Australians. So this may be possible, right? If you see historically, race had been used for a lot of different things. Sometimes you might have heard that race being used to say English race, right? Sometimes you might have heard English race, language based. Sometimes you might have heard human race. They use the term race to define human species. They say human race. We still use the word human race. So race is being used to refer to a species. Okay. Or sometimes it is used to refer to language, English race. Or sometimes it is being used to differentiate continental people living in different geographical areas, African race, American race. So race took different meanings over a period of time. Later, given the consequences that we discussed in Naji's time or in USA, that various laws that took place to in eugenics that we discussed, people started differentiating others based on their morphological features. So it took a different meaning altogether in social sense. And they started even confusing between cultural differences and morphological differences. So cultural differences mostly refer to ethnic groups, right? How we eat, how we perform marriages, for example, how we run societies. So there are ethnic differences among us. They started relating that to morphological differences. They started even going to the extent that someone who is fair considered to be superior, some considered to have better intelligence, right? So we started correlating appearance with their superiority or inferiority. And they even went to the concept of eugenics that we have seen, went to exterminate them or forcefully sterilize them so that they only wanted the superior people to live. Like that, race actually has taken different dimensions over a period of time. Sometimes you hear the word, is race a valid concept? Sometimes you hear the word, what does it mean in the what is the social concept of race? In terms of social, in the social context, how is race taken? In biological context, what is race taken? Because sometimes biologists say, I think it is mainly purely for environmental understanding or understanding of evolution, evolutionary traits that we talk about. Do they really have connection to our performance? Do they really have connection to superiority here? We don't. So after understanding of what is causing this race, because we have talked about many factors, epicanthic fold. Today I'm going to tell you briefly what factors, genetic factors or environmental factors that control them. We know there is a biological basis to these characteristics, but there is no connection to superiority or inferiority. All whites don't have great intelligence, all blacks don't tend to be dumb, because you have seen that people tend to say, in a general sense, in race concept, they do say. So they may say dumb black sometimes, they may say dumb blonde sometimes. So they try to correlate with appearance, which is not true. Biologically, I think I'm going to talk to you. If you have to say if race is a valid concept or not, what arguments do you make? Okay. But even before going to the race, whether race is a valid concept or not, I would like to briefly tell you that we talked about various characteristics yesterday. And we discussed that there are some traditional characteristics like skin color being the obvious one, and many other metric and non-metric characteristics being used to differentiate humans. But I think even the trend has changed. Now, what do we use? What is a better way of seeing whether we are different or similar to others? Imagine that we are talking about whether Africans are different from Indians. What is the best way to see how related they are? Those facial indices or morphological indices, what do we use? What should we use? Given our understanding has grown now.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
The question is, what is more suitable to understand the differences, differences between, let's say, two different geographical, groups, like Africans versus Indians, Americans versus Africans. So taking those physical features like skin color, and height, for example, are they more suitable, or do we have better alternatives today? If at all you want to, identify the difference or estimate the differences or similarities among them.
I think with the gene technology, I think it's more accurate or more we get more informed.
Correct. So utilizing what is, I think sometimes we hear the word molecular anthropology. So considering the molecules, our DNA, our RNA, our proteins, because we looked into the aspects of using them for determining our diagnosis, determining the problems, identifying the actual gene which is undergoing mutation as a component of diagnosis of a disease, correct? So molecular anthropology, where we use is different molecules, focus on DNA, RNA, proteins, like these type of things, with more specificity, with more advancement in technology, had helped us in dealing with diseases, in diagnosing genetic problems, in bringing better technologies for treating problems. Correct. Also, the components of molecular anthropology can also help us whether we are different and how different, who is different from whom, what is the connectivity. So for that, I think we are nowadays focusing on more modern tools, which are more genetic or molecular in nature.
Sir, can we also use genetic markers?
Can we also use genetic markers? Yes, we can also use genetic markers. Yes, absolutely. That is what I think we can use here in molecular anthropology as well. Because initially we talked about races were different, classified based on obvious biological features, right? And today, I think modern investigators are focusing on using genetic components, like their DNA sequences or protein sequences, amino acid sequences. We are able to use them. They provide us the unchangeable means, although mutations do happen in them, because many of these factors do change. Facial features, these tend to change over a period of time as environment changes. But our DNA elements more or less tend to remain stable. But of course, we talked about this in adaptation, genetic adaptations, that they also acquire some changes which are better suitable to us in the given environmental context. Right? But they can provide us clues that are unchanged. You can get the DNA of our ancestors and check with us today and how much did we change over a period of time. So modern investigators are focusing on genetic components, nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosomes, analysis of Y chromosomes to see how male inheritance have changed over a period of time. Or they focus on mitochondrial DNA for understanding maternal inheritance pattern. Because we know Y chromosome should come from the fathers to sons, whereas mitochondrial DNA should come from mothers to any children, males or females. Okay, I'm going to talk to you a bit later, but we noticed that the genetic studies have revealed that we probably have more differences within the group that is living in a geographical region, as opposed to more differences that we perceive between groups. So there are enough differences among Indians, there are enough differences among Africans, enough differences among other groups like Americans. Not just sometimes, and if you really calculate, I think differences seems to be more at group level than between what we consider as races. Okay, I'll explain that bit later. But genetics have revealed that there exists more differences among a particular group, which was once considered to be a race. But overall, doesn't matter whether you're African, American, Asian, we tend to share quite a bit of information. Human genome sequencing studies have indicated that there is so much of similarity among humans. Doesn't matter. They have not categorized people into different races, but they have seen few genetic elements here and there that are only shared between few groups, indicating they are more related compared to the others. Okay, because those mutations that have happened in recent generations can be seen in other groups when there is an intermixing that happens. So today we are also going to focus on that. But overall, human populations are remarkably homogeneous in terms of their genetic information. So modern concepts of dealing with the race concept had indicated that we do share quite a bit of similarity among us. So there is not much basis to the concept of race. And you may find differences in variability among different races as well. Like Africans may show more variability than Asians. Okay, but there is no clear basis to tell them that they are different genetically. So modern concepts of race is also clarifying the problem of race and why we shouldn't take this basis of morphological appearance as a means to support the idea that one is superior over the other. Okay, so what I added here, I added that there are new ways to look into the concept of race. And as we dig more into these details, it is becoming clear that we don't have too many differences among us. Doesn't matter where we live. And those few differences that we have, it is to support our survival. So that is a biological basis to this. And I was telling you the race has taken different meanings over a period of time, starting with the species to specific populations. And even sometimes confused with ethnic groups, the word ethnic groups. Okay, right. But did someone actually prove this? Some of these concepts are showing that we are genetically similar. But any anthropologists have attempted to disprove the concept of race. So for that, I would like to take you to the concept of is race a valid concept? What is the validity of race? Some reasons I've already given you based on molecular anthropological tools like more genetic analysis, genome level, DNA level, protein level analysis. But traditionally also, probably you've studied about Franz Boas, founder of American anthropology. Okay, so German-born American anthropologist. So this is one sentence I would like to begin here related to him. If you were to select the most intelligent most imaginative, most energetic, and emotionally stable third of mankind, then all races should be considered. So meaning no single race has this superiority in them. These features are found in all of them. So you may have to find a mixture of all of them to get the best of humans, as per your definition of best race. So what he's trying to say, no race is superior to the others. There are mixed characteristics in all of them. Okay. But how did he come to this conclusion? So he had indeed did anthropometric analysis on people to prove or to disprove that race is not valid. What did he do? So Franz Boas, as I was telling you, is the founder of American anthropology from 19th century. So he was one of the few scientists, among the first scientists, to challenge this taxonomic view of races that we have seen. So he challenged the concept of classifying humans based on those morphological features. We also looked into the criteria given related to that. So if you are defining race, that should be based on an stable characteristic. But are these characteristics stable? For example, we talked about cephalic index. We measured the cranium. Cranial index or cephalic index has been taken as one way of looking at our differences in races. But is it a stable index? Is it a stable measurement? Or does it change over a period of time? Because if races are superior, those characteristics should be fixed. But are they changing? Do you see that change? To answer this question, so Franz Boas, what he did, many Europeans, like who were actually coming, like they were migrants that they were traveling. So what he had done, he actually measured their cephalic index, the ratio of head length to head breadth that we talked about, of parents born in Europe and their children born in United States. So Europeans who moved to America, okay, he took their cephalic indices and he also measured the cephalic index of children, just to see if this remained constant from parents to children. And what did he find out? And he studied this on 18,000 immigrant families, huge amount of data that he collected on 18,000 immigrant families. And the indices have revealed that adults and children's head shapes had differed. There is some difference, not a great deal of difference, but definitely mathematically you can count and show that there is a difference between parents' indices and children indices. So meaning it is not a fixed characteristic, it is changing. So it is not a fixed characteristic. How did he come to this conclusion? By measuring cephalic index. By measuring cephalic index of whom? Cephalic index of European parents and American children. And he could reveal that there is a difference, the difference that we can observe between the parents and children's indices.
So does it mean that Europeans went and married some American and then they have a child? It's like,
Possible. But it's not like all Europeans went and married Americans, right? So initially they were also holding their culture. They were also more worried about having that ancestry being going into the children. So it was not a very, in general sense, it didn't happen like that. So there were marriages happened within them. I think over a period of time, more intermixing was happening there. And when they say 18,000 immigrant families, I don't think they all got married to Americans. So he was trying to prove that whether this cephalic index, which is taken as a reference point to differentiate races, is it a fixed entity or is it changing? So his findings have clearly undermined the idea which was very prevalent at his time, that racial types were innately stable, because people thought racial types were innately stable. But his studies pointed that they are not stable, they are variable. There is enough biological plasticity in our body. So we are not fixed entities. Either you see in terms of evolution, whether you see in terms of race concept, they are not fixed. Okay. And as you pointed out, so at times the difference may be because of intermixing, but the superiority should hold. But that's not the case. Are all Africans who move to US, are they retaining their color? Over a period of time, you see that. Like sometimes I frequently hear this half American, half German, half Polish, they usually say. So their characteristics get intermixed. You see intermediate nature of them. Partly because of their genes, which got mixed, partly because of environment. But what we are learning here, they are not fixed. There is enough biological plasticity or flexibility in us. So based on this, Franz Boas said that race is not a valid concept. It is invalid. So you can cite his example here and the work he has done to say that race is not a valid concept. I'll give you a few more ideas related to that. Ashley Montagu's ideas also I provide you here.
Sir,
But this is, yes, Franz Boas' idea of whether race is valid or not. Yes.
sir, I did understand his point because since he take European parents and American children, so is he including the effect of environment also?
So what
Like,
is trying to ask here, that Europeans moved to Americas and they had children, the next generation came. Are they carrying same characteristics? Because if there is no environmental connection, doesn't matter wherever Europeans go, they should retain this idea. They should retain their characteristics, which is not the case. They're not retaining it. So race is not a fixed character. These characters that we are using for classifying them is not fixed. So environmental influence. So what he was trying to show, that it is changing. What is the reason behind it? One of the major factors is environment. But inherent plasticity is there. It is not fixed. So he was trying to show that. So the concept that they believed based on that this is fixed. Africans are not fixed. Americans are not fixed. Their characteristics would change. They may even disappear. The differences may disappear, which are already disappearing if you go to America. Okay, so like that, with that work, Poya's work laid the foundation for a scientific focus on biological process rather than on typological or classifying processes. So he put a foundation towards his scientific approach in dealing with the differences, and they should not be accounted towards the racial differences. And also we notice that the human variation that we see among these races, it is based not on different genes. So if we all should have, like, let's say, dark people versus fair people, then there must be dark genes, fair genes, or genes coding for these different characteristics. They should have different genes. But do we have different genes? We don't have different genes. Okay, the differences that we are noticing, and morphological differences that we are noticing and using it to classify races, they're not coming from differences in, or they're not coming from different genes that we have. So the differences are not because that we have different genes. Rather, they are because of varying frequencies of same genes, blood groups. We have same genes, but AB, and O blood groups, proportionality does of them change because of polymorphism. Same genes, but show polymorphic nature. It's not like Africans have different genes compared to Americans. We all have, as humans, have same genes with different, morphological differences. Meaning, what am I trying to say? Different polymorphism in there. So some mutations here and there, they may produce less or more of that protein. So characteristics do change, and which are tuned by environment. So the main idea here is we are not different because of different genes, but we look different because of polymorphism within the same genes.
So what does it mean? Varying frequencies of same genes? Is he talking about the expression part, or?
It's talking about alleles, like what we learned in population genetics. Different alleles are present. For same genes, different alleles are there. The overall structure, organization, functioning of our body is same. The differences are there within the genes. If you're all different, then we should all have different genes, right? But it's not the case. Do we call Africans or Americans with a different species name? We all are Homo sapiens. Okay, so we all have same genes. Doesn't matter. We all have same number of chromosomes. So that is what you see. I'm extending this concept with the work of Ashley Montagu that we discussed in the last class. Few ideas, I think few points that he gave here. So a few points I think you can easily understand as per Ashley Montagu. As far as research and observation have been able to prove, the chromosome number of all human races is same. We all have same 46 chromosomes. Doesn't matter where you live. And all of the 5, 7, 10 races, depending on how many races you classify them into, they all are interfertile, meaning they can marry each other, they can exchange their gene pool, so they still belong to same species. They've not become new species. And the blood of all races is built with the same components, same antigens, or sometimes they even use the word agglutinates. Agglutination means a clumping process. Okay, so they're made up of same antigens. So these ABO blood groups are compatible with each other. Although the minor differences are there, which affect the compatibility here, but all major blood groups, ABO blood groups, are compatible with each other. So they can be, races can transfuse their blood without too many complications. So we carry same blood, same components in the blood, we carry same number of chromosomes, we carry same genes. Okay, and despite that we can see more differences among us, we indeed have more similarities than differences. We are more alike than different to each other. So this was taken from Ashley Montagu's work, highlighting the futility of racial categories in the book called Man's Most Dangerous Myth. The fallacy of race. So in that book, Ashley Montagu made these points that we have so many similarities and less differences among us, among races, basically.
Sir, does Human Genome Project also have some contribution to?
Yeah, so as I was telling you, Human Genome Project have showed that, as I was briefly mentioning to you, that our genetic similarity is very high. All humans share 99.9% of genetic material. So it pointed out that we all have similar genetic content in us. So definitely, genomic studies started with Human Genome Projects. Human Genome Project have revealed that we do share quite a bit in terms of our DNA. In 1.6, we'll discuss what is called phylogenetic studies, where we can order, different organisms based on their relationship. How similar are they? Okay, these are called phylogenetic studies. We're going to talk about them in the next part that we're going to discuss in unit 1.6.
During talking about the genome projects we had talked about ethics also, wherein we talked about how people might go for a particular individual based on the genes or genes he is carrying. So if we all are same, then how can, I think I'm missing this point.
Sure. We all are same in the sense, like we all carry same DNA elements or genetic elements, but we do have differences in terms of how do we perform. Like, let's say someone wants to create a more intelligent individual. So they are saying that they can create more intelligent individuals by copying or cloning an individual's DNA. We believe that Albert Einstein, for example, is a very intelligent person. His IQ levels were very high. So if you copy his DNA and make a clone of Albert Einstein, would we get someone who is as intelligent as he was? No, there we realize that it is not just the DNA, it is DNA plus our environment that define who we are. But the concept, the belief that DNA is everything may lead to that outcome, but which is not the case. Okay, so there are, of course, where we have differences. Like in the same classroom, for example, do you think every individual who is from same village or same town, do they have same amount of intelligence? They don't. What was the reason behind it? Partly their genes, partly the exposure, school, books, friends, family environment. So a lot of these things do matter. So we have differences among us, but those differences are not different between different races. We're not saying all Africans are less intelligent, all Americans are more intelligent. That we cannot say. Within all of us, we have enough difference. That is what they're trying to say. Within a group, there are more differences than between the groups. You may find enough differences within a place, within the same racial group like Asians or Caucasians. Do you see the point? Okay, so it's not like we have different genes coding for different characteristics. So just taking the DNA will ensure that we get better intelligence. It's not the case. But that belief is kind of misleading. Okay. So even to clarify this further, American Association of Anthropology, you can also cite this. American Association of Anthropologists also made some declaration on this. They said the race concept had taking a different turn and a very wrong turn. So anthropologists have come together. So under the American Association of Anthropologists, so as per them in 1998, they provided a statement on the concept of race. They said, we have been conditioned, most of these concepts we already discussed, okay? So we have been conditioned to view human races as natural and separate divisions within the human species based on visible differences. So we're all conditioned to think like that it is natural and we all are different. And mostly what is done based on the appearances. And eventually this race became a strategy to divide people, to rank people, to control colonies. That Aryans, we hear about Aryan debate, right? Aryan migration debate. Aryans had come and they were considered to be superior because they were good looking, better looking, and they dominated the other groups of people. Like we hear that discussion in India that Aryans have dominated, right? So people who traveled to other areas, they considered themselves as superior, and they started dividing people based on their appearances. They started ranking them, and they started controlling people, saying that we are superior to you. You're supposed to be slave, and I'm supposed to be your boss, or your king. So those differences have stemmed. And we all agree that we are not unambiguous, or we are ambiguous. We are different. We are definitely ambiguous, meaning there is a difference among us, clearly demarcated. Clearly there are specific differences among us, and we are biologically distinct. There is no doubt about that. So American Association of Anthropologists said, we have clear differences among us. We can be seen as a distinct groups with respect to those biological features. But if you really see where most of the difference exists, as I was telling you, studies are pointing out that there is greater variation within the racial group itself. They quantified this. That 94% of variation is seen within the group. So we have enough differences among us. As I was telling you as an analogy, within a classroom, you might find enough differences among people there. Sometimes they are more relevant, more related to each other when you compare different races. Then people belonging to the same group. When they quantified these differences, there seem to be 94% variation within a group. and only 6% variation between the groups. If you consider the whole variation, only small percentage of variation you can see between two races, and more differences among or within that group. So whatever we are considering so far, the racial groupings only supported by 6% of the variation in our genes. So very small percentage of our DNA supports this concept. So genes are same, but there is enough variation, polymorphism, basically. So less of a differences between races and more of them within a race. That is what they say here. Human skill color distribution that they looked into, that only 6% of human genes are account for the phenotypical differences between races. So remaining 94% differences can be seen within a single race. Okay, and also we already pointed out that the phenotypic traits that we have, they exist because they are largely adaptive in nature. So this is part of our us adapting to the environments that we live in. Okay, not differentiating us in terms of different abilities, okay, or different other components that was mistaken in the past.
Sir, can we take one example to see the? I mean, I'm not able to understand this topic. I mean, the difference and similarity, 94% and 6%.
Right. So, what are we trying to learn here? So, if you say that, let's say it's skin color or intelligence, we can take one of them. Let's start with intelligence. So, how do you measure differences in intelligence? If you assume that whites are more intelligent, blacks are less intelligent. So, let's pick up few Americans and use some of the other tools to estimate their IQ levels. Okay, and get an average picture of IQ of Americans and IQ of Africans. Pick up an average number. Okay, and then see how different they are. So you may find, let's say, you may find about two-fold difference, a three-fold difference, or more or less no difference between their intelligence. If you pick up an average number, like remember we talked about height. So what would height is a quantitative character. So what happens in height? We actually have anywhere from 4 or somewhere around 4.5 to 7.5. Okay, feet. You may notice. Population wise, you may pick an average number that Indians are of 5.8 or 6 feet height. Americans are maybe 6.5 or 6.3. But within the group, if you measure, what differences you'll find? There will be Indians with the height of 4 feet. There will be Indians with height of 7.5 feet. The range of difference that you would find is different enough within the group. So if you pick up an average number may be more or less same, may not be too different between Americans, Asians, and others, Africans. And consider within the group, there is enough difference. There are more intelligent people, there are less. You may find dumb people, you may find most intelligent people in India. You may find shortest people and tallest people in India. So isn't there enough difference within the group, within a given population? And is the difference is more between the races or within the race? Do you find like all Americans are tall, all Africans are short, or vice versa? Can we say that? Is that the case? It is not the case. We have enough differences within us. Within Africa, within America, within Europe, you'll find enough differences among them. You'll find shortest people, tallest people, dumb people and most intelligent people. And you find people who have different complexions of color. Right? So there are more differences within us, within a given region, than between the people living in different regions. So between races. Is it helping you? In what context we are looking at? That is why I gave the analogy of classroom. You have enough differences. Like look at the height of people in your class. Let's say 10th standard. You will find people of varied heights within the 10th class itself. So there are differences among us like that. More, and the numbers say that 94% within a group and 6% between the groups. So this is to say that race is not a valid concept the way we are looking at it. Okay, right. I think they went on talking about this. The neighboring populations, there is much more overlapping of genes and their phenotypic expressions, physical expressions, and lot of similarity between the races that they're talking about. And throughout the history, whenever different groups have come in contact, they have interbred. And those differences are also diminishing. Whenever they came in contact with each other, intermixing had happened. Those differences are getting nullified or diluted. So they're not even state fixed. The continued sharing of genetic material has maintained all of humankind as a single species. So even today, we are single species. We remained as single species. All of us are Homo sapiens. Dark skin may be associated with frizzy or kinky hair or curly or wavy or straight hair, all of which are found among different indigenous people in tropical regions. Okay, these are all characteristics that are part of environmental adaptation. Those associations that you see, but still we have same genes, we have same species. And these factors render any attempt to establish lines of division among biological populations both arbitrary and subjective. So any attempts that people have made to classify races, they're arbitrary. There is no reason to it. And they're very subjective. Because they intend to do it. They're not objective in nature, they're subjective. They want to prove they are biased. So this is a brief summary of declaration given by American Association of Anthropologists on Race. A lot of resources for this concept. Okay, just develop a good idea on biologically what is race and socially what is race, which is valid concept, and what dimensions it has taken, and specific details. So a few questions that if you look into from the past. So to put into the perspective of the exam demand for this chapter, look what they're asking for. Would you be able to relate that from our discussion? 10-marker question came in 2017 on concept of race. Explain the concept of race. short note on concept of race. So you start from how race concept had developed and how it has taken different meanings. I'll provide you some reading on this or some text as we build the idea in the class. And one question that came is differentiate between race and racism. Is there a difference between race and racism? Okay, so that is biologically classifying them into race and trying to connect the idea of their nature, their behavior, their superiority to their appearance, right? So race and racism, what are the three major races of the world? That is why I stick on with the three races of the world. They asked what are the three major races of the world? Give important biological criteria used frequently for such a classification. So what we discussed in the last class, those biological factors. So briefly talk about those factors, mention three races, where do they live, okay, and what are the terms, concepts that we use to define them or classify them biologically. So race and racism, race versus racism, three major races and biological criteria to classify them. So this was a 15 marker question that came in 2013. And what else? 2010, this was an old question. Is race a valid concept? We just discussed today on this. Is race a valid concept? Critically assess the relevance of racial classification in Indian context. Set, assess the relevance of racial classification in Indian context. For that, Risley's classification you learned in social anthropology. Risley's classification of different elements that we have within India. You can talk about that, okay? But discuss what we did in what we discussed in today's class and also partly in yesterday's class. Also, you can take the help of that video where they're talking about that we don't have too many differences. I think most of those things that I will discuss today, like Ashley's points, they talked about them. I think in the video, there was one lady, she has Japanese ancestry, American, but Japanese ancestry. So the way she was considered is different between different countries. In Americas, people don't consider her as Caucasian. They don't consider they don't say she's complete Caucasian. Americans' view of her is very different. She's a faculty who teaches social anthropology. She talks about her experience in that video. So Americans are not considering her as complete Caucasian. Whereas if she goes to Japan, they don't consider her as Japanese. They see them as Caucasian. They say she's Caucasian. So the view that we have differs between areas to area and people to people. And some people tend to think that she is Spanish. So our perceptions are very different. And those perceptions are not same. In America, it is perceived differently than in Europe, than in Africa, than in any other countries. Okay, so that is what they're talking about. It's our perception. It is not real. The real differences are meant for something else. Okay, right. So those things. And what else they asked in the exam? The next component, I think two things that I'm going to talk to you today. One, explain the role of heredity and environment in races, in formation of race. What is the role of hereditary factor, environmental factor? How much do environment play a role? How much do genes play a role? Okay, I'm going to briefly give you some data on that. Okay, for each some selected characteristics, I'm going to give you what is the genetics role, what is the role of environment, which we kind of talked about in twin studies. Okay, and another one that I would like to discuss with you is discuss race crossing in humans with suitable examples. Race crossing, because in the syllabus we also have the concept called not only differentiating races or classifying races like this, but we also have a concept on race crossing. Race crossing in man. Okay, once a question came on race crossing in man, so I'm going to cover those two aspects. With that, we'll finish talking about unit 9.5. I think I mistakenly said 9.6, but 9.5. So two things. What is the role of genetics? What is the role of environment? What is known about this? And second, race crossing. Okay, this is kind of a document I made on this, which I think I've shown you some of these things yesterday. So dermatoglyphics, blood groups, we talked about. In Indian context also, I briefly mentioned, based on the above racial criteria, people of India can be classified into different racial groups. So what are the different racial elements? You can provide Risley's classification here. I have shared common morphological features. Okay, and also sometimes you see geographical variations, region-wise variations within them as well. Most of the population inhabiting in the northeast India are basically have Mongoloid features. So people in northeastern part of India have more Mongoloid elements.
So the video seems stuck.
Is it? Oh yeah. Okay, I'll reshare this. Do you see it now? Okay, right. So I briefly talked about in the Indian context, you can mention, you can focus on these elements. So expanding more on Risley's classification, talk about in India, you may find different elements. Northeastern Indians basically have more Mongoloid features, whereas central and southern part of Indians predominantly have some Australoid and Negroid elements. If you move towards the central part and southern part of India, you'll find more of Australoid and Negroid elements in them. And northern part of India shows more of Caucasoid and Indo-Aryan elements. Northern India, you would notice more Caucasoid and Indo-Aryan elements. Right? So like that, in Indian context also, we have differences in different elements. So where people have come from, inhabited from. Some of those racial, some of those elements are still there. So I've also provided a conclusion. Already we discussed this. And racial traits in relation to hereditary and environment. I'm going to give you a bit of idea on different traits and the basis, genetic basis and environmental basis to that. Some of these we already discussed. Just wanted to put into the context. So if you get questions like this, what can you answer? So skin color. How is the skin color formed over a period of time? Is it because of our genes or is it because of our environment? What plays an important role? We already discussed this, right? I was telling you two ideas. One, vitamin D, production of vitamin D. Second is protection from UV light. So wherever there is too much of sunlight, we produce more melanin pigment, which protects us from UV light and allows enough sunlight to enter into the body to make vitamin D. Correct? Opposite is true if you go move towards the polar regions where there is less sunlight, so they produce less melanin. Okay, so they don't need too much of protection and they need to get enough sunlight to make vitamin D. So the color effect has both components. So we have genes, we have several genes, we have 150 genes that are known to affect our skin color. Directly or indirectly, there are about 150 genes, an underlying genetic component to this. But do we have different genes in Africa and America related to skin color? No. So what are we learning here? The proportionality of it is, or the expression of it is defined by our environment to satisfy our requirements. That is vitamin D and protection from sunlight. Otherwise, we'll die from cancers. We live in near equator, don't produce enough melanin. UV light can kill us. UV light can damage our DNA directly. So environment is playing a very, very big role here. But there should be underlying genetic component to that. So there are many genes which are responsible for it. It's a quantitative character that we talked about. Okay, but environment plays a bigger role here, a very, very important role here. Natural selection, genes responded to environmental condition for helping humans to survive. So it is the environment that shaped the skin color using the genes that make up, that produces melanin pigment. So both environment with the help of genes shaped the color in formation of the races and the color of the race. So this is something that you know, so just wanted to put in this context. Next, hair texture. What about hair texture? I've collected some data here. If it is too much for you, ignore it. You just take how much ever you can relate here. Because this is one area where there's not much written, not much information is available. So I was digging into what controls hair texture. I was trying to put into the context of how is it related to the concept of race. So I'm providing here the data. So genetic factors appear to play a very important role in determining hair texture as well. Either people have straight hair, wavy hair, or curly hair, three forms of hair that we talked about, or people may show different thickness of their hair. Okay. And there may be some differences in terms of genes. So they could identify few genes that are found to be different, meaning they probably have enough variation within them to be considered as different. Like two genes they found called EDAR gene and FGFR2. I don't think names are very important. You don't have to by heart. If you can remember, a couple of genes were identified, like for example, in Asian populations, which are responsible for defining the thickness. So some particular variants are found, okay, in Asian populations. So polymorphism, gene polymorphism, genetic polymorphism, yeah, associated with the differences in hair thickness in Asian population. The same thing in European ancestry, people with European ancestry found to show variation in another gene called TCHH gene. So polymorphism in another gene called TCHH gene appears to be responsible for hair texture that is seen in Northern European ancestry. So different genes are contributing to this. The problem comes from the fact that we have so many genes controlling these factors. So some underwent some changes, giving rise to, it's like respiratory adaptations that we have seen, different adaptations that we have seen in high altitude regions. We have seen three populations have adapted differently. So they're attaining different outcomes here, okay, by making changes to different genes. So different genes underwent changes here. In Asian populations, it is EDAR and FGFR2, and in European populations, they are TCH genes. But there are so many genes, we still don't have a clarity on this. But definitely, genes are playing an important role. Variations that are taking place within the genes are contributing to some of the variations that we are seeing within people living in different geographical areas. But many factors can influence not just the genes, okay, such as hormones, certain medications that we take, chemicals. People do apply a lot of hair relaxers, correct? So a lot of components may change the nature of our hair. Not just the genes, hormones, chemicals, medications, etc. And age. Age also, the density of the hair changes, grayness appears in the hair with aging. Okay. You may not find too much of an environmental role here, but seems like more genetics playing a role here. So genetic factor seems to be playing a bigger role as far as our understanding goes today, which may change over a period of time because we don't have a complete picture about it. Okay. Similarly with eye color is something that we already discussed. It's also a quantitative character. Melanin pigment, very much like in the skin, pigmentation of the iris, the center. So the hole in the center. So iris is a pigmented region in our eye. And that pigment is nothing but melanin pigment. And we don't have different genes for eye color. We have same genes, but amount of expression may vary, very much like same concept as skin. I think we already talked about this. Some studies pointed that there are multiple genes that define our eye color. Okay, but these genes, what do? They help in production of melanin, transport of pigment, storage of pigment. So they deal with many genes, multiple genes deal with these various aspects of melanin production and transport, storage, etc. Okay, but there's enough variation, right? Some people have brown eyes, dark brown eyes. What does it mean? They have more melanin. So their body makes more melanin pigment. Same thing if you move towards the European countries. What do you see? You mostly find people with blue eyes, people with green colored eyes. Why? They have less of melanin pigment. So lighter versions of the eyes. So here the expression is different. There seem to be not much of environmental factor here again. Expression of genes seems to vary. That's about eye color. Next, head size. So what defines the head size? Genetics or environment? When our head is formed, definitely there must be DNA elements to define the formation of head. It is, I don't know whether you ever studied this development process, very finely tuned, and we have certain genes, and the amount of genes and their expression is very, very important. Timing and level of expression are so important. So it's all perfectly planned and designed, looks like that. Small variation would result in some abnormality. Sometimes you see people don't have their heart on the left side but on the right hand side. Small difference during the development process can bring these changes. But certainly there are genes that regulate this process. Certainly there are genes that regulate the unfolding process of development, or genes responsible for, defining the process of development. There is no doubt about that. We should have DNA elements for that. And we have already talked about this. Measurements that we take, cranial indices that we calculate, clearly indicate that we can measure those differences. But do we have different genes responsible for different head shapes, different dimensions of head? That seems to be not the case. So we probably don't have genes responsible for different shapes of head. Our head shape seems to be determined by dynamics of developmental systems and influenced by factors such as our birth, nutrition, cultural wearings, etc. So many components. In the early stages of life, if you have any cultural wearings that you have, it wouldn't let the head to take up a shape, a different shape, what was determined by its genes. And when a child is born, depending on what strain that his head has experienced in the process of birth, the shape of the head is determined by that. You probably see this, right? Sometimes they use vacuums to pull the baby out. So people who actually were born like this with this assistance, they would have this extended heads. The head is actually kind of extended like this, because in the early stages where there is more flexibility, they use vacuum to pull the baby. They will have these elongated heads. Like birth process, nutrition, cultural wearings, and all these interventions that we use during the birth process, delivery process, can define the shape of head. So it is not purely defined by our genes. Genes do start the process, initiate the process, regulate some event, but many other factors like this would define the outcome.
I remember my mother telling me that I was pulled out using some
Forceps.
Forceps. So she kind of jokes about it. Your head is too
Which
because of that.
because they have to hold, they have to put enough strain, correct? And you might have seen, what is that movie? Three Idiots, right? They use vacuum cleaner to pull the baby out, right? It would actually pull the head like this. It squeezes the head like this. So the shape of the head can be changed.
And at that stage, the skull is also totally not formed, and it's easily moldable.
Flexible. Sutures. We talked about gaps. The sutures are there, right? So that is the purpose of them, looks like. Okay, like that, head size is mostly controlled by various different factors, different environmental factors. We also kind of briefly discussed about nose shape, right? Nasal index we discussed about. I was talking to you about Thomson's rule. So people living in certain climates tend to have longer noses compared to the others. So more warmer climates, broader noses, and in colder climates, more longer, thinner noses. So what is influencing the nose shape? Environmental factors. Looks like the environmental factors are shaping the nose shape. But scientists could also identify them. I think in 2016 work, May 2016, a study published in Nature Communications, they've indicated specific genes. They analyzed over 6,000 people with different ancestry in Latin America, found out that there are 5 genes which are responsible for controlling the nose shape. So we have to have underlining genetic component for all of these. But do we have different genes coding for those characteristics? May not be the case. It seems to be adapted to the environment that we live. Okay. Next one, I would like to talk to you. Human height, also another quantitative character that we used in polygenic inheritance, right? Human stature or human height. So it's a quantitative or metric characteristic. So it is controlled by multiple genes, polygenic inheritance. We discussed it under. So multiple genes control it. It's also multifactorial character, meaning it is also environment that can play a role. And twin studies that we talked about related to height have indicated that 60 to 80% of the differences in height between individuals is because of genetic factors. So as per twin studies, 60 to 80% contribution seems to be coming from genetics in height. So multiple genes and what alleles are present in combinations seems to be defining the height. Whereas small role of environment. So remaining 22% of the role seems to be from the environmental factors like nutrition, hormones, etc. But gene seems to be playing an important role in human height. Okay. The last one, which is epicanthic fold. Epicanthic fold, I think I also briefly talked about this. Epicanthic fold seems to be evolved as a tool for vision to the people residing near the Mongolian desert, thereby protecting either from the glare, because normally in the deserts you will have that reflection of light, or from the airborne sand particles. So it could be an environmental adaptation. So this might help people to provide smaller opening, thereby protecting it from the sand particle damage that it can cause and the glare that these people may experience. Okay, like that. It even blow ridges. Some people actually have some variation in the blow ridges. They are also providing some sort of protection like this. But overall, we don't have a clear understanding about the genetic component. Seems like environment is playing the role, but we don't have. I don't think people with only epicanthic fold are surviving better in these regions. May not be the case. So sometimes it is considered to be a neutral adaptation without much benefit. So we don't know more than this related to that. So we don't have a specific idea about genetic factors, but environmental protection seems to be a playing a role or driving it. But does it mean that people who have these factors, these characteristics are at advantage here? May not be. Okay. So many people feel that it's a neutral adaptation, not providing any specific benefit to us. Okay, like that. This is some idea about genetics or environment playing a role related to some selected characteristics. In case if you get a question on contribution of genes and environment towards it, talk about them. Eyes, skin color, talk about human height, discuss about the various components of hair texture, eye color, head size, etc., and nose shape, etc. Okay. So I'm going to share this document with you. Brief ideas and points are that you have written down should be more useful. That brings us to the last part of this unit, which is more simpler, easier. That is race crossing in man. So race crossing in man. What is the concept of race crossing?
Sir, can we take 5 minutes break or 2 minutes break?
Sure. Actually, we probably need just 10 minutes to finish this up.
Okay, then let's continue.
This is not something too technical. The previous one was a bit technical. I wanted to keep it to the end. It was more relevant to discuss before that. So this is just nothing but mixing between different individuals. So this is called science of human hybridization. So racial crossing is crossing between different races, like Africans and Americans, for example. So concept is not too complex. So racial crossing refers to the concept of or science of human hybridization, creating human hybrids. So intermixing, basically. So various terms they use. Sometimes they use the word racial amalgamation or mixing, racial amalgamation or mixture, and which has been happening since as old as the races are born. Right? So this is an ongoing process since ancient times that race crossings are happening. We all see it. This is all visible to us, right? Why are they happening, or why did they happen in the past and why are they happening today? One reason is man is a migratory animal. We travel, prefer migration. People do migrate, people do marry there, people do exchange their genetic information with others. So one reason is the migratory nature of us. Second, transportation. We have more connectivity. For education, we travel. For leisure, we travel. For business, we travel. So transportation, there's more connectivity, improved changes in transportation. And commerce, businesses, trade. We can also add travel here, right? In the past, we've also seen people traveling and also people traveled, in the name of wars to acquire the new regions, to expand their kingdoms. So all those reasons, migration, transportation, better transportation for trade, for travel, etc. All these are the factors behind racial crossing. What is the outcome of this? What had happened because of this? So by mixing various characteristics, are we producing more optimal races? Are we bringing together some good characteristics or superior characteristics? Are we forming a better race? I don't know whether you can even define that. What is best, better, what is superior changes from context to context. But sometimes people may believe that we are bringing all those elements together, but not necessarily only positive elements, even negative elements come together. Negative consequences like becoming smaller and darker. So by marrying someone from a population like pygmies, for example, if you have your children tend to be more and more shorter, so that is considered to be inferior, right? So producing more shorter babies, darker babies may be seen as a negative consequence, but if you consider them as negative, on average, what happens? It reduces the height of those populations. So some negative consequences are also possible. Think about marrying tribal women, where some rare genetic disorders are common. You may bring in those genetic problems into the population. Some negative consequences may come from the race process. Smaller, darker, less healthier. Okay, and also dark eyed, dark haired, etc. So these features. Can we provide any examples of race crossings? So lots of examples you can give. I think one most common being the forcible transportation of African Negroes as slaves to Americas. Blacks and whites issue, the ongoing issue, or the major issue that we have talked about in eugenics or in the concept of racism. Right? Africans being transported as slaves to Americas, that led to intermixing of them. Excuse me. Also, this is one example, African Americans. Okay. Then in history, we have seen Arabian and Semitic traders from those countries, Afro-Asian countries, for example. Those Semitic traders, Semitics traveling to Africa, for example. So people from something like Arabic countries, those people traveling to those areas. Intermixing had happened between them. Alliances between royal families. Queen Victoria, many of her children moved to different countries and married to different kings. So alliances between royal families also led to intermixing of human races. So you can talk about Queen Victoria's family and her children. You can find this online. They say who they married to, how hemophilia went on, troubling many kings of different royal families. Of course, that is because of intermixing. Okay, so these are some examples of intermixings that have happened and the reasons behind it. So what is intermixing? What are the factors or the reasons behind it? And consequences, examples. Okay, but what is about the study of racial crossings? Could we do a good amount of studies on racial crossings? It is actually very challenging to study race crossing. So many anthropologists have expressed that it is very difficult to understand or study the racial crossing, because it mostly becomes subjective. When you are trying to study the races, it becomes subjective. You start differentiating them being superior or inferior. So objective studies cannot be easily done. So it's very difficult to perform objective studies. They easily become subjective because of our deep-seated instincts of race purity or pride of race that we normally have. And of course, because of other reasons we talked about in physical anthropology, we need at least 3 generations of data. Our timeline is not enough. Our generation gaps are high. They can also cause problem. We cannot perform controlled crossings. We don't, if you want to study how does it work out between European and Asian, you cannot control those marriages. But examples, the reasons that we talked about in 9.1, and very little data. So we don't have that uniform data that we to substantiate these ideas. Only in some groups you may find it more commonly. We have to have enough variety here. Nowadays, I think that is happening. If you go to many countries, migrations are becoming so common. I think eventually we may find enough data on this. And many social and political factors. They support only certain races, not the others. So social and political factors also hinder the studies on racial crossing. So racial crossing has not been done very well. Now studies have not been done very well because of the problems associated with this. Okay. But of course, is there a need of studying race crossings? Is there a use for it? We may get some insight into the morphological differences that we have, like the things that we was talking about, what genetic factors, what environmental factors. Insight into races and their basis of characteristics can be obtained. And even in US, for example, the studies are used for immigration, for defining who should we allow, who should we not allow, who are more suitable. So for immigration laws also, in US especially, these race crossing studies are used. Wherever there is a connection, right? Understanding the biological basis of it can be used in defining the immigration and also to understand the health consequences. Genetics consequence, I was telling you that race crossing can result in. If a person with so-and-so disease is married to someone like this, they can provide insight related to the health consequences. And have you heard that marrying a race like this would kill people? If American marries an African or Asian marries a European, have you ever heard that they would kill people? No. That is what they're saying. Race crosses were at worst biologically harmless. They don't kill us. Some differences may be found, but they won't kill us. Okay, but people initially focus more on understanding the racial differences, but after the dimension it took in US and in Nazis' time, okay, they started, less focused. They started not supporting the concept of race crossings because they don't have too much of validity, but they may have different uses like this. Okay, right. So this is briefly about race crossing. So a brief concept of race crossing. What is race crossing? Okay, and what led to race crossings? Consequences of race crossing, examples, issues related to race crossing studies, and uses of race crossing studies. Okay, that is briefly about the race crossings. So with that, we finished unit 9.5. Okay, racism, biological base of morphological variation, metric and non-metric characteristics. Excuse me. Racial criteria, racial traits in relation to hereditary and environment, biological base of racial classification. Lot of redundancy is there in it. Biological base of racial classification, racial criteria, biological base of morphological variation. They all mean same. Racial differentiation. How do you differentiate different races based on these characteristics? Okay, and finally we talked about the whether race is a valid concept and race crossing in man. We discussed. Then we finished talking about 9.5. Okay, that brings us to the last part. That is the leftover part from unit 1. Okay, I think we have to discuss briefly biological and cultural factors 1.4a, 1.5, 1.6, majorly 1.5 and 1.6, because 1.4a more or less falls in the some of the components we study in 1.5 and 6. Okay, it's covered together. So 1.5, we'll talk about primates, classification, adaptations, features, quaternary fossils, etc., and phylogenetic, our ancestors, how they are. Okay, some data that I'm going to provide you here, some concepts as per the exam demand. We're going to talk about 1.5, 1.6 that we are left with. So I heard that you have a class tomorrow morning, right? So we are not going to have a test tomorrow. So when do you want me to take these classes? Do you want to take a class tomorrow? Is it okay if I take a class in the evening tomorrow? Do you prefer it or not? Okay, I'm assuming we probably need about 3 to 4 sessions, maximum about 4 sessions. We'll wind this up. So,
If that's the thing, we can do it, and because from 1st March, everyone will be definitely busy with prelim.
yes, correct.
If it is possible,
Yeah.
so can we just do it by the one more days left?
I can take even longer session if you want. I can even provide a longer session on this if you want. Two things we can do. One, I record the classes. You listen to the classes later. This is one option. Okay. Or I'll provide you the brief overview about the session. Look at the questions and what needs to be answered. Like quaternary fossils, we don't get too much of questions. We're not getting too many questions. There are only specific questions that are coming from quaternary fossils. Okay. The specific defined topics are coming, questions are coming from this. So if you go like question wise, may be useful to you sometimes. But I want to provide a broad picture to that, because otherwise you lose the essence of why we are learning about only Neanderthals. Why are we learning about only modern humans, for example? Okay, so they won't make sense. So I'm going to briefly consider that component. So if you want, I can take a quick and long sessions, more brief sessions on them. Okay, we'll do that.
Sir, since if you are open to sharing, say, just the recordings as well, then I feel if you could just regularly schedule the classes like you do during next week, whoever wants to attend will attend, and rest can watch the videos.
Sure.
But is anyways, it's the same.
Yes, we have a control on the video, so we can definitely give you that. And
longer sessions, maybe during the end of the day, I find it very
so
tiring.
Morning sessions are done. I'm going to switch to morning sessions.
Morning, I think we can.
So I'll take the morning session, 9 o'clock session, because Sunday I heard tomorrow is the last class.
Yes.
So then I can switch to morning sessions from Monday onwards. Okay, I'll do the Monday sessions. If you want, I think I'm assuming maximum 4 sessions. I can put it into 3 sessions. Okay. So because some terminology we already learned, only in 1.6 we require a bit of explanation on terminology. 1.5 also classification we need terminology. Otherwise, some features of behavior, cultural aspects, some of them you might have studied in social cultural anthropology. But I think 4 sessions are best for it. So let's take 2 sessions for 1.5 and 1.6 and wind it up. Okay, so if you won't be able to attend the class for some reason, it's all right. I'll put them and I'll provide you the access to the videos. Okay, what about the archaeology part? Is it, how many sessions are you left with, or is it done?
Again, three or four sessions.
Okay, do that. You can actually, I can talk to sir and provide you access to these videos later. So after prelims, if you want to watch them, or you want to watch them when you're bored of reading or studying for prelims, okay, we'll do that. And I'm going to have a brief summaries on these things that you can see. So they will be useful to you for quick revision.
So, are you going to take classes or videos?
Classes. I'll take the classes. I'll put the time like 9 o'clock in the morning. I'll record them like this. So people who can attend, they can. Otherwise, we'll give access to them. So both are possible.
Sure.
When to assign the time? Yes.
Yeah, I think morning is better. Evenings are very.
I know it's also difficult.
Difficult. Yeah, since you are taking time out, it felt bad for me missing that class the other day.
Oh, that's all right. This happens because sometimes you have some challenges, right? You have to manage both. So which is all right. And I really appreciate your cooperation also on that, because my life was very terrible in last few months. And I don't want to just give up on this. Continuing with that work. Right. And we'll stay in touch. I think this provides us more opportunity this time. We have access to videos, we can have discussion. Some tests, I don't know whether how well you can take the test now. I can also help you with answer writing after prelims part as well. We'll stay in touch. The Telegram group will be there. Okay. Right.
So we can submit the tests, sir, the ones that we have not given. I plan on writing them maybe in the coming weeks.
Yeah. But do one thing, send me a message on Telegram. Okay, because I don't get the notification for that. So if you send me, sir, I submitted this test, I'll evaluate and give it. This is all right. Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No session tomorrow then, right? Sunday morning. So Monday morning, I'm going to take the next session. Right. Thanks.